Welcome back. Today we're going to transition for the next couple videos into discussing factoring. Now we're going to break down factoring into very manageable pieces. So the first factoring we're going to review is factoring when a equals 1. And what I mean by a equaling 1 is that the x squared term has no coefficient. So basically there's a 1 sitting out in front of the x squared. So I want you to remember what that means. When you have just an x squared as your first term, basically you need to remember that that x squared is created by an x times an x. So when you're thinking of factoring as undoing, foiling, x squared comes from x and x. Well, if you think about the last term, that 12, well, that 12 is coming from these two numbers right here. Now that's where your options start coming in, okay? Because remember, what multiplies to give us 12? Well, we're talking about 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. So we have some options that we have to consider. And the way that we know which option to pick, the way we know that is we have to be able to get 7x out of that. So we have to choose numbers, the one combined. So here, this 3x with this 4x needs to give us that 7x, which in this case, that is a combination that works. If you choose a combination that doesn't work, you have to pick a different combination. So if 3 and 4 didn't work, it means you have to try 2 and 6. It means you have to try 1 and 12. Okay? So again, that's just the basics to review. So let's dive right in. Let's do some examples together to review how this works. So the first thing that I always do when I'm setting these up is I'm going to set up my two parentheses, okay? And I know right away this x squared, the way I get x squared is x times x, okay? So I'm going to start right away with that. How do I get 20? Well, to get 20, I need 1 times 20. I could do 2 times 10. I could do 4 times 5. Now, if these aren't coming that naturally to you, you can always use your calculator to check the numbers that divide 20. So what I mean by that is just start at 1. So 20 divided by 1, well, of course that'll work. So 20 and 1. Well, what about 2? 2 gave me a whole number, so that means 2 times 10 works. Let's try 3. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there. Oh, here, let's redo that. Let's try 3. Well, no, 3 didn't work. So 3 doesn't multiply to give me 20. Let's try 4. Oh, 4 and 5 work. And now I can actually stop, because if I were to keep going, now I'm just going to reverse what I've already done. Okay, so as I'm going through these, again, if you're ever struggling, just use your calculator. Start sieving through numbers, starting at 1, and just take 20 divided by 1, 20 divided by 2, 20 divided by 3. And you can do that to find the ones that work. Okay? So, once we have our list there, we need to find two things that multiply to 20, which is where our list came from. But then they also have to add to 9. So I think you can see the ones that work that will also add to 9 are going to be 4 and 5, because we're going to get 4x from there, 5x from there, and that's going to multiply or add to give us 9x. All right, let's try our next one. Same thing, this x squared, where's it coming from? Well, x squared is going to come from x times x. To get negative 18, well, let's find the things that multiply to 18. Well, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. And again, you can always use your calculator to search for those numbers that I just found. Again, just to show you really quickly, start by dividing by 1. So 1 and 18 works. Now divide it by 2. So 2 and 9 works. Divide it by 3. So 3 and 6 works. Divide it by 4. Well, 4 doesn't work. I didn't get a whole number. Divide it by 5. Oh, 5 doesn't work. And you can see now I've reversed. So now I know that my search is done because I'm just going to start reversing things that I got. All right? So again, don't be afraid to just run through your calculator to find when I divide 18, how can I get whole numbers? Now the thing I want you to recognize though is this time I'm trying to multiply to a negative 18. All right, so that means I'm going to need a positive and a negative because the only way to multiply to be a negative number is you need one positive, one negative. Okay, so I need to keep that in mind as I'm doing this, and I'm going to be talking about a positive and a negative number. Well, I need to think, now I'm shooting for a positive 3x. All right, so I need to pick the combination, one being positive, one being negative, that will lead to a positive 3. And I believe if I choose those, that this is going to work. And again, the biggest thing that I'm going to review with you is how to check to see that it worked. So that gives me a 6x. That gives me a negative 3x. Well, 6x minus 3x, that does give you the 3x you were shooting for. So that is the combination that works. All right, let's keep going. So first thing I'm going to do is set up my parentheses. As always, x squared is going to come from x and x. 15 comes from 1 and 15 or 3 and 5. This time we're more limited in our options. Okay? But again, I'm multiplying to a negative 15. So I need to realize I'm going to be looking for one to be negative and one to be positive. Okay? You always have to make sure you recognize that right away. That to multiply to a negative number, it means one positive, one negative. And if I need them to add to be negative 2, that means I'm going to need the 5 to be negative and the 3 to be positive. Because when I combine those, 3x and minus 5x, that gives me the negative 2x that I was looking for. All right, last example for this note. Again, that x squared comes from x and x. 72. 72, that takes quite a bit of searching, okay? I don't think you guys would recognize all of these off the top of your head. So again, to go through that search, 1 and 72, then 2 and 36, 3 and 24, 4 and 18. If you take 72 divided by 5, it doesn't give you a whole number. So 5 doesn't work, but 6 does, 6 and 12. 7, again, doesn't work. 8 and 9. And then if you were to keep going, you'd just be reversing the numbers that you had anyway. All right, Now, this time I want you to notice something interesting. So I'm multiplying to be positive, yet notice I'm adding to a negative number. How can I possibly add to be positive or multiply to be positive, yet add to be negative? Well, the key there is you're actually looking for two negative numbers when that happens. Okay? Whenever you're multiplying to be positive and yet adding to be negative, that means actually both of these are going to be negative numbers. Okay? So now I need to find which pair in that list add to negative 17. Well, if both of them are negative, that's going to be those two, because you get a negative 8x, a negative 9x, and those combine to give you a negative 17x. All right. Thank you for joining me once again. Make sure you have all of this written down, and then please see me if you have any questions.